Hi everyone, welcome back to Bridge. I hope you had a wonderful weekend and you're back at it and rest and recharged as we're getting into the mid-Mays. I am planning to be in Singapore probably mid-May, that is probably end of May, I should say. Around from the 22nd to 27th, I should be there on a holiday. So those of you who are in Singapore and you want to catch up for a cup of coffee or have a conversation, I'll be there and drop me a message on WhatsApp and I'll try and catch up if I can and try and meet as many and much of you as I can when I'm there in Singapore. End of May, around 31st, we plan to do a meet and greet in Bangalore, and hopefully you would have seen the form up on Instagram by now. And if you can fill out that form, it would be very helpful for us to kind of plan the venue and the number of you who are planning to attend. And last time when I was there in Bangalore, I did try and meet a lot of you. Unfortunately, the response was so huge, I couldn't manage to accommodate all of you at a venue. So this time the team has got together and said, let's get proactive and ahead of this. So there you go. If you fill out that form, it will be helpful for the team to figure this out. All announcements said. Now to the video at hand. Trump had come out with an executive order, something known as the most favored nation. This applies to the pharmaceutical and the pharmaceutical drugs the American people are buying. Historically speaking, the Americans tend to pay 2 to 3 times more compared to other Western marketplace. That means in Canada, in Europe, the drugs are 2 to 3 times cheaper than what it is in the US. Those of you who have people in the US would know this, because every time we visit the US, or used to visit the US, we used to carry drugs for them, medical drugs, that is, not those kind of illicit drugs. I'm talking about diabetic tablets, heart ailment tablets, sometimes even cancer medicine. And that's why even Americans would like to go across the border in Canada and try and pick up pharmaceuticals when required. But of course, carrying across the border, it's difficult with the regulations and having a prescriptions in place. So it's not easy. But this is the main reason this market has been there. There's also a black market in the US, thanks to the dark net, where people buy required medicines and pharmaceuticals in the black market, in the grey market, thanks to this huge disparity in price. So Trump, in his great heart and his great love for his nation, has decided to pass an executive order known as the most favored nation, where he is asking Medicare and Medicaid to negotiate better drug pricing with the pharmaceutical companies. Right? So out of $951 billion, which is being spent in Medicare and Medicaid, which is the total spend, this should be only part B, drugs, which constitutes around 39 billion out of the 591 billion, which is around 7%. So it's not like a huge chunk. So you might be wondering, why are the pharmaceutical companies all screaming and shouting about this? Because he tried to do this way back in 2020, and then he was out of office. Joe Biden came in, and Joe Biden and the Democrats historically have always liked this idea of lowering prices for medicines. But they, instead of taking this approach, which what Trump had done, they shelved that and they took the Inflation Act, where they allowed Medicare and Medicaid to negotiate directly with the pharmaceuticals, instead of them trying to sit there and regulate it, because they went to federal court and federal court immediately had put a stop to what Trump was trying to do. So they took that approach, and with little amounts of success in doing that. So now Trump is back at this, what failed in 2020 because he was out of office. He's revisiting this, where he's trying to force pharmaceutical companies to lower costs. There has been tremendous pushback from the pharmaceutical companies, threatening to sue and put legal impediments to doing this. Why is that? Because big pharma makes big profits from these part B drugs in the US, and they cover things like cancer, autoimmune disease, heart disease, HIV, eye disease, MS, diabetes, and respiratory disease like pneumonia and all that. So in terms of revenue, what they get from this, cancer constitutes around 60% of their revenue, autoimmune around 75%, heart disease around 48%, HIV around 84%, eye disease 63, MS 79, and diabetes 76, and pneumonia and related diseases around 50%. So I'm sure Rupesh should have put the graphic up on the screen. You can see this. So there's a lot of money there. So though the out of the total budget of Medicare of almost $600 billion, this is only around $40 billion. Though the percentage of only 7% may look small, but the profit margins on these are quite large. This is why there is strong resistance from the pharmaceutical companies towards this. Then, of course, there's a fear of precedent. Precedent means once this is approved by the government and there's not much resistance and everyone agrees to this, then the government might look at Part D drugs. Part D drugs are much larger and much broader drugs, which could really hurt the pharmaceutical companies. So they don't want to give any inch. They feel if they give an inch or two, then they'll end up losing the entire battle and entire field. So this is what the pharmaceuticals are mainly resisting. And also it means that there could be a market signal. If the American government is able to successfully do this and push the pharmaceutical companies to do this, then the next big market player in the US are the insurance companies. Private insurance companies negotiate these kinds of prices and deals with pharmaceutical companies for their insurance providers. So they can move in and tell the pharmaceutical companies to lower their prices, hurting their margins even more. And of course, this will impact broadly all pharmaceutical companies which I mentioned, which are dealing in these drugs, and it will impact their earnings. And if it impacts their earnings, then it will impact shareholder confidence. And if it impacts shareholder confidence, share prices will come down. So this is the lay of the land. So is this done? Is this there's no way to stop this? No. It's not just because he has signed this, it's not going to get done. Like most things, if you come to realize, even with the tariffs, it creates a lot of mud in the water, as they say. He stirs it up, but it's not as easy as him just signing a pen and things get done. Because the American system of government and the way the rules and laws work, it's not so easy for the president to enact these things. So immediately, I'm sure the pharmaceutical companies will go to court and try to block all this from happening. The companies which might be affected the most by all this will be something like Pfizer, Merck, Johnson & Johnson, Amgen, Eli Lilly, and Bristol Myers, which are companies which deal with these specific areas such as cancer, autoimmune, heart disease, HIV, eye disease, MS, diabetes, and pneumonia. So what does this mean to Indian companies and Indian pharma? Well, of course, this also affects the margins of Indian pharma if this goes through and if it's successful, and if they manage to negotiate lower prices. Of course, Indian pharmaceuticals also get hurt because Indian pharmaceuticals also depend on the huge margins which we get in the US compared to places like Germany, Europe, and Canada, where it's much lower in terms of margin. So the American margins are much larger and thicker. So it will affect them. And there is a small window of opportunity also for Indian generic manufacturers. If the big pharmas in the US pull back from doing these drugs, saying the margins are too little and we're not interested, then of course there will be an opening for Indian generic drug manufacturers to step in and provide what is required. And overall, of course, what the pharmaceutical companies are saying is that means less money will be there. If less money is there, less R&D will be there, and less money will be spent in research and development. So all this is a big question. This, of course, is a counter argument to that, also saying with the new developments in AI and AI powering in research, shouldn't that offset the cost and also help anyways with pharmaceuticals? So all of this is up in the air and it's very nebulous. As investors, what do you do? I really don't think you need to have any knee-jerk reaction to this news. This news, like I said, will take time to float and come to fruition, and all of us getting lower prices in drugs, that doesn't happen instantly. So wait and watch would be my approach to this. If you have a certain strategy, continue doing that strategy. If you see a value, buy into those values and not to focus too much on these kinds of news. And in the long term, pharmaceutical companies are required. In the long term, human beings will need to have pharmaceuticals because we are biological beings and we'll need to take these kind of pharmaceuticals to help us with our body. AI cannot replace any of that. If anything, AI can only help in diagnosing diseases and in research and development of better pharmaceuticals. But there's no way we'll be required to stop taking drugs and medicines. So these two are there So as value investors, if you're looking at it in the long horizon, it's just a question of finding the right companies at the right price and buying them and holding them on. Speaking of right companies and right price, tomorrow I want to talk about a specific drug company in the US. No, not Johnson & Johnson, another one, another giant. Do catch that video tomorrow where I'm talking about that company when I deep dive into that and try to offer that as a value proposition, or maybe not. And do look out for that video tomorrow. Thanks for watching Be Rich today. I hope you found some information which was useful and kind of allayed your fears, and you are sleeping better with your pharmaceutical portfolio now. Nothing else more to say. See you tomorrow with another episode on Be Rich. Thank you and good night.